Hello and welcome everyone back for another backlog review. I'm HatTopGaming. Today's episode is all on the indie game Wick Hex. Delisted from storefronts in the summer of 2025 due to licensing most likely. I wanted to finally jump in and see what the game had to offer and tell all of you whether or not you missed out on buying it. A prequel set before the movies where John Wick has to go do John Wick things in order to save the day and kill a lot of bad guys along the way. Everything you do must be a calculated maneuver in this turn-based strategy game that truthfully does feel one of a kind. Just like always, we'll be going over the same three things in story, gameplay, and performance on the Steam Deck before giving the game a rating out of 10. And make sure to stick around to the end of the video for a sneak peek of my next review. Both all that out of the way, let's begin. Starting off with the story, a mysterious stranger has taken Winston and Charon? I actually didn't even know that was his name until now. I had to look it up because I never actually remembered him being addressed by name in the movies. Um, Anyways, they're taken hostage as their captor makes plans to make an example of them as revenge against the High Table for revoking his father's seat, his birthright as he claims being stolen from him in the process. The plot is ultimately the weakest part of this game, seeing as it's a prequel to the movies, meaning we know what the outcome is. Not that anyone would expect John to die, of course, but with the context of this being a prequel, plus the game is canon, so obviously no one of importance is allowed to die. Like, he explains it throughout the process of the game, and it's just like, okay. They take the show of force concept from John Wick 3 and reuse that idea here, but in a far dumber manner. Story wise, there really isn't much to talk about here. I think it works, but again, without any real stakes, it kind of makes it hard to really care about the story. Jumping on over to gameplay now, it's definitely a ballsy move to make this a turn based strategy game given what John Wick is high octane action akin to something like Max Payne. But hey, sometimes trying to make something new, it can work. It can bring a new perspective to something we all enjoy, and maybe even find a new avenue for fans to enjoy the medium. Alongside that, it can also bring in new people as well. So, does the gameplay ultimately do any of that? No, not really, and it really doesn't come close. Gameplay centers around two things. Planning out how to execute the stage, which entails spending golden coins on buildings and stashing weapons or other items on certain levels to retrieve them later. But here's the thing, everything is so expensive you can hardly afford one of the upgrades and one stashed item if you're lucky. On top of that, in the later levels, you can't even stash stuff, so you're left choosing one decent upgrade or two minor ones. Combat being turn based sounds interesting at first, but given the gameplay I'm showing you guys, does it really look particularly appealing? Maybe it does, but in practice it just feels very bland. Everything in this game is calculated in seconds, moving over a tile, changing stances, strikes, takedowns, shooting, parrying, all of it takes anywhere between a third of a second up to a full second and a half. I understand everything John and his enemies do is done in split seconds, but it translates poorly in the game. The game shows a bar on top of the screen to make it clear how long your actions take compared to what your enemies will do, so you can best decide how to do things. But when those seconds of actual game time translate to minutes of playing time, it can make the whole experience feel like a drag. The combat being turn based makes it so that facing enemies one on one is no fun at all. John is faster, more accurate, and stronger than all enemies, including bosses, so fighting anyone solo is a breeze to the point where it's really not fun. On the other hand, once two or three enemies show up, you don't really have any real way to counter them without taking damage. That, or they're going to basically just try to take turns and try hitting you, and it never really works because you're always just, again, quicker and faster. Which makes it all the more annoying when half the levels have an automatic trigger to spawn three or more enemies at once when you're trying to exit the level. So while you have your brawler trying to hit you, you have gunmen trying to shoot you down, but for whatever reason, the devs made it so there's no such thing as stray shots. Both you and the enemies can only damage the intended target, making it so that you basically have to cheese these segments where you can. And the boss fights are even worse. You can't damage them until you knock their armor down past a certain point, but you can't just beat them up either. You have to shoot them in order to kill them. And of course, they tend to spawn in more henchmen as soon as you start trying to fight them. Which really makes me question why the game has a carryover system when it comes to health and ammo. Every stage has a set amount of levels that as you progress through, your health and whatever ammo you have carries over with each level as well. So if you finish the stage with 2 health and no bullets in your gun, that's how you start the second stage. I understand it's meant to show how John is constantly up against the wall and has to make do with whatever he picks up along the way, but you can get stuck really easily and have to restart the entire stage all over again. And while this thankfully didn't happen to me, I got pretty close once or twice, to the point where I had to play levels perfectly or I'd die after one hit. Also, it doesn't help that there's no way to save progress on a level. You either beat it or you don't, which makes the later ones even more annoying when it's just one particular section that's holding you up. There's other mechanics such as the focus system, which is equally as dumb, but essentially acts as a stamina bar, so you can't infinitely do takedowns or dodge enemy attacks, which, sure, I guess. You can only have one gun equipped at a time because stashing a pistol in your belt line or pocket is apparently impossible, and you can't grab extra ammo off of other guns or dead henchmen. You can only have whatever's in the magazine. because apparently no one carries extra mags on them either. The game makes numerous decisions that hurt the gameplay and overall feel of what John Wick is supposed to be, and most of it just comes down to being what the game is, which is turn-based, and frankly, it was the opposite of a match made in heaven. Lastly now, touch on performance real quick. There isn't anything to note. The game ran at a smooth 60 frames per second, and I didn't encounter any bugs or glitches when playing. I saw some screwy ragdoll effects once an enemy was killed, but that's kind of to be expected in a turn-based game. I did have one level stutter a bit until I completed it, but I think that was an issue for me putting the Steam Deck into sleep mode and then playing it after I woke it back up. It fixed itself once I got out of the level, so that's my assumption. The game is rated as playable on Steam Deck due to controller configurations, but it should really be Steam Deck verified. The only reason it's not is because the game uses the touchpad as a mouse and the right and left triggers for different clicks, instead of a traditional button layout. But I think it serves the game well to use that control scheme instead. Also, the graphics are nothing to write home about. It's just a generic looking block art style, something I'm sure we've all seen before in the indie space. I really don't think it should surprise anyone how I feel about this game. Now, don't get me wrong, I thought the voice acting was good and the performance was solid, even if that was expected. And the game did have its moments when I hit a stride and was having fun. But ultimately, the game's choice to be turn-based hurts it far more than it could possibly help. It also doesn't help that as being a prequel, it leaves no room for actual stakes. That isn't to say I need to think that John may actually die, but come on, give me a reason to think things are going to go not so hunky-dory at the end. After 7.5 hours and 13 of the 31 achievements unlocked, well, how would I rate this game? Honestly, I'm going to give it a 4. It's not the worst game I've ever played, but I can't recommend the game. I feel like it's just the kind of game where if you recommend it to people, they would play it for a bit, see what's there, and think, meh, it's not bad, but I don't care enough to complete it. Of course, I did myself though, but that's because I make backlog reviews. While the game is no longer sold on storefronts, there are physical copies out there you can buy and some Steam keys for third-party resellers that are about $6 to $7 at the recording of this video. So if you really want to see how the game plays for yourself, you do have options. I just wouldn't recommend you waste your time or money on this game, as I really don't think there's a whole lot here, and I just feel like if you own it by chance, go ahead and play it. There's nothing to lose, but if you don't, I don't really see the point in it. I didn't really care, and this isn't a game that's going to stick with me in any real way. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. Hope you all enjoyed today's backlog review. If you have played this game before, I would love to know what you thought down in the comment section down below. If you have any other comments, questions, or concerns, let me know and I'll make sure to get back to you. Once again, thanks for tuning in. I'm HatTopGaming. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on social media if you want to keep up to date with everything going on with me and the channel, what current game I'm playing, and anything else. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I will see you all later. Peace.
Cedar Hills is not exactly a noted hotbed of criminal activity.
What is that?
That's not entirely true. There was that whole serial killer thing.
Why do you hate Cedar Hills so much? It used to be like town mascot.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present The Mill.
You spend enough time in my line of work, you realize every place has got its demons.
Thing that belongs to the boy you're looking for.
You can't shoot a movie in here.